Tasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Nitinamine. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Can you all hear me okay, by the way? This mic is working well.
No.
Yes? Yeah? Good?
You have a distinct voice.
Thank you. Thank you. So yes, today we'll be talking about learning through illusion. And I think we can get started by taking a look at some optical illusions. I don't know if you guys have seen these before, but on first glance, are the horizontal lines in this picture parallel? Doesn't look like it. Yes, no? So it was
Horizontal lines are parallel.
the lines going this way.
What kind of
They're
question
curving.
is this?
Do they look parallel?
Yeah, they do.
They're curving to me.
The horizontal lines
Yes.
look
As long as they don't merge, they're parallel.
Yes. But in the sense, are they straight? Do they look curved at all to you?
to me the horizontal line look like horizontal lines.
Yes.
The parallel lines. So
Yeah.
there are no parallel lines.
But they're not straight.
They don't
They're-
look straight.
They're dancing.
Yeah.
Like Krishna.
They seem to be dancing, right? They seem to be curving, but actually they're perfectly straight lines, right? It's just that the colors make it a little odd there. So this is an optical illusion, right? They seem to be curved, but actually they're straight. Yes. So here's another one. How many black dots are in this picture?
Can look at this one.
There is no black dot.
Aren't any yet.
There's no black dots, yeah? Yeah? So you can see, like every time you think you see a black dot, you like look at it and then you realize there's no actual black dot. So how many black dots are there? There's none, yes. So here's another one. This is maybe my favorite one that I'm going to show you guys today. Are the orange circles the same size?
Could be.
Probably, because we know that we know that it's an illusion now, right? But do they look the same?
No.
They don't look the same. So I think this is kind of where I want to start to begin our exploration today, which is we're surrounded by illusions all the time, right? So what can we learn from these illusions? We just saw 3 optical illusions just now. Any quick reflections from anyone?
Don't trust your eyes.
Don't trust your eyes, that's a good one. Okay. Any other quick reflections?
Your first instinct isn't always correct.
That's a good one. Your first instinct may not always be correct. Anything else?
Everything is not what it appears to be.
Everything is not what it is. That's also a good one.
Perception can shape our reality.
Ooh, I like that one. Perception can shape our reality. Yeah, we're gonna dive into that a little bit.
Give you a cookie for that one.
Yeah. Do we have cookies? Do we have cookies?
No, but there will be for sure some
Later, okay.
Some
Later you get a cookie.
Somewhere there's cookies.
I don't know
Yeah.
what cookies.
At some point there'll be cookies and you'll get one.
As it seems. Not
What's that?
everything is as it is.
Not everything is as it seems.
I'm thinking, okay. Just have shown in my head, I'm sorry.
So, yes, I put down a few things that came to my head when I was going through this. So when we shift our perception, reality changes, right? So kind of along with what you were saying, the perception is reality. We can't trust what we see. I forgot who said that one. It was someone. Yes, you can't trust what you see. This is another one that came to mind. Things might not be as they seem. We can't always trust what we see in another way of saying this, another way of saying this. We need to know it's illusion in order to learn from it, right? So this is kind of what the very last illusion kind of hinted at. right? The orange circles didn't look the same size, but we guessed that it was an optical illusion, so they're probably the same size, right? So we need to know it's an illusion in order to actually learn from it, in order to actually have some way to gain from understanding that it's an illusion. And this last one is, I think, an interesting point that I want to kind of dive deeper into, which is that we can't rely on our experiences alone, right? We need to have some level of philosophy or inquiry about the truth in order to like gain or benefit from anything, right? Like we can't just go off of purely the vibes, right? If it's only the vibes that we're like focusing on, we're going to be misled in some ways. And we find that a lot of times, especially when it comes to spiritual movements, when it comes to spiritual life, where people will often rely exclusively on their experiences. How does this make me feel, right? Do I feel good? Does it make me feel good? Yes, it is very important to have positive experiences and good like experiences in spiritual life. But if we miss out on, let's say, the philosophy of spiritual life, we may not be actually understanding the full essence of it, right? So this is an important lesson that we can take away. Any questions on these? So what I just said with regards to experience.
Why is it important to understand philosophy? I mean, why can't we just enjoy the religion?
That's a great question.
Sometimes like, wow, what a struggle to understand and everything contradicts.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's actually kind of what we're going to talk about now, which is why the philosophy, right? So this is kind of like this is the main thesis of the night, is that in order to understand what is reality, we need to go beyond our initial perception of things, right? We need to have some level of inquiry. We need to have some level of exploration beyond just whatever our experiences are. Yes? And so in order to do this, let me just look at my notes real quick, real sneakily. Yes. Very sneaky.
We'll cut it.
Yeah, you guys had no idea. I'm a master of illusion right here. So, in order to understand reality, we need to go deeper than our perception. So this brings up three interesting areas that we can kind of go from here, right? First is, what is reality? Like what are we trying to actually understand? Like, we haven't even defined reality. We haven't given any level of exploration towards what is reality. We also haven't given any exploration of what is our perception. We haven't talked about what a perception is. We haven't talked about anything along those lines. And specifically, we also have no idea what it means to go deeper. Like, what does it actually mean to go deeper? And so those are kind of three areas that I think we should explore in this central thesis, right? What is reality? What is our perception? And what does it mean to go deeper than our perception? So it's an interesting thing, reality versus illusion. Let me change my phone so I can have this open all the time. 1 second. So reality versus perception. Reality is often translated in Sanskrit as Sat. Sat is eternal, yes, as it says. It's often translated also as truth. Sat is often also translated as truth. This is in contrast to illusion, which is often translated as asat, meaning that which is temporary, that which is not eternal, that which is also false, not true. And so the important points to note here is that with regards to reality, it's the mirror opposite of illusion. Yes? We often hear in spiritual life, like, oh, like this world is an illusion. This is a very common phrase. How many of you have heard that phrase? Like, oh, this world is illusion. Yeah, a few of you? Yeah? And so if we hear this phrase, we need to understand, okay, if this is illusion, what is actually reality? And so what we're looking for when we speak of reality is we're looking for the truth, specifically the absolute truth. Now, what's that? Yeah.
Sanskrit doesn't
Yeah. So specifically, we're looking for the absolute truth, right? Something that is eternally true, that is true in all situations. And so when it comes to most of us, we end up living our relative truths a lot of the times. So for example, today was really cold outside. Yesterday was really hot. And we'll say this, right? Yesterday was so hot. Oh my God, it was so warm outside. Yeah. This is a true statement, but that's a true statement for someone who's also experiencing, just standard New York City weather. If someone's coming from Dubai or India, yesterday was probably pretty cold, even though it was very warm by New York standards, right? So these statements, it's hot or it's cold, these are relative truths. We can always say something's hot or cold relative to something else, yes? But if we give a precise temperature, like yesterday was 65 degrees Fahrenheit, that's an absolute truth in the sense that that is true regardless of the situation, regardless of what it's relative to, yes? And so this is the distinction between an absolute truth and a relative truth. So this is a very simple example with the weather, right? That there's an absolute truth versus there's a relative truth. Now you can imagine that there are situations in the world where it's harder to distinguish what is an absolute truth versus what is a relative truth. For example, someone may say, killing is wrong. Yes, killing other human beings is wrong. But then the caveat may be given, oh, well, in self-defense, okay, it's understandable, right? This is something that we kind of all agree on, that, yes, we should not go around killing people on the street, but if you're attacked in like your house by a burglar or something, it's generally agreed upon in the legal society, at least in legal circles, that acts in self-defense are not punishable at all. And so this presents an interesting question, right? What is the absolute truth? That which we can always rely on to be true. Yes, this is the important distinction. So the absolute truth is very easily defined in contrast to what illusion is. And so illusion is simply identifying with that which is temporary, right? It's very easy for us to identify with temporary things. And so this is how we understand, are we looking at things that are illusion, or are we looking at things that are reality, right? Are we seeing things as part of the absolute truth, or are we seeing things as part of that which is temporary? Yes? And so we can kind of understand that by going towards our, let's say, our identifications. And so, yes, the statement, illusion is when we identify with something temporary. This little pyramid here is, I think, a really nice way to visualize the levels of identity that we have. If you look at it, at the very top, you have the soul, right? So the Bhakti texts, the scriptures, such as the Bhagavad Gita and so on, they all make the claim that we are inherently the soul, right? And that we have also built up other aspects of our existence, such as our intelligence, our mind, our body. Our body includes our senses, our sense of sight, our sense of touch, our sense of taste, smell as well. And then we also have the other things that we identify with, like the objects of affection that we have. And so it may not be easy to see how we identify with the intelligence, or we identify with the mind, or we identify with the body or the senses or the objects of our affection. But I think there's a really interesting example that we can kind of dive into on actually kind of how silly it is often for us to identify with these things that are not the soul specifically. It may seem very like contrived example, but we all know of cases where people will identify with the objects of affection. That's the thing that I think this is the easiest way to illustrate this point. I am a Eagles fan, right? Like I love the Philadelphia Eagles football team. I identify as a Philadelphia Eagles football fan, right? I have affection for the Philadelphia Eagles football team, right? I also have affection for, let's say maybe people have affection for political candidates. People have affection for, like fantasy novels and, particular movies and fandoms and flavors of ice cream. But if I were to then say, I love chocolate ice cream, and how dare you, any one of you, if you like anything that's not chocolate ice cream, y'all going to hell. Right? If you don't like chocolate ice cream, you're out of your mind. It's nonsense. Like you're just not worth existing. Like right? If someone were to say these things, which is actually what it sounds silly to say it with regards to chocolate ice cream, because it's like, it's chocolate ice cream, man. Like, who cares? But like, vanilla is also great. But but if you're gonna identify so strongly with your flavor of ice cream, this is part of what we identify with. Doesn't it also make sense to question, why do I identify so strongly with my body? Why do I identify so strongly with my intelligence, with my mind, and so on? And so the real, let's say, benefit of spiritual life is that we can start to identify with that which is reality. With that which is soul, the soul is spiritual. This is what is taught in the Bhakti texts. So as soon as we start to identify with the soul and identify on that spiritual level, then we can start to shed these further layers of, let's say, temporary identifications that we have. And by doing so, we can, let's say, transcend the illusion. We can escape the temporary things. Now, how to do that, right? It sounds very easy. It sounds very easy to just say like, oh, like how do we like actually get to the level of identifying with the soul? It's quite difficult, right? To actually get to that level. And so there's an example that comes to mind is that how many people have ever gotten a splinter? Right? Most of y'all have gotten splinters. How do you get a splinter out?
Tweezers.
Tweezers, okay. I heard it.
Another splinter.
Another splinter, right? You take another piece of, another thorn or another piece of wood or something, and you kind of dig it out from your skin, right? That's how you get rid of a splinter. And so that's actually kind of how we can use these, let's say, temporary things that we encounter, like our temporary identifications, like our body, like our mind or our senses or the objects of affection, the things that we care about, our intelligence. We can use those things in order to, escape them, to start to identify with the soul. I think that's...
What would be an example of identifying with intelligence?
Identifying with the intelligence. Well, it's more, let's say, I would think that I think this, right? Because I think this, I'm correct, right? And so because I think a certain way and my thoughts are a certain way, I'm proper. Like I'm doing something, like you have an affiliation to something. You often see it in terms of like, let's say, I adhere to a particular philosophy, whether it's a religious philosophy or I adhere to a political philosophy, like, oh, I'm a communist or whatever, right? And so it's an intelligence thing, right? This is my logical reasoning part of the subtle apparatus in the head. Yes?
And how do you use a splinter to get rid of this
Good
affection?
good question. And so we'll get to that later on. That's part of it's yes, to be coming. Yes, you had something. Yes.
When I hear the word I think of ego.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow would the ego be a part of that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the example that you gave, saying whatever I.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So in any identity, our ego is a critical part of it. So it's about where our identity is focused and fixated, right? So if we look here, my identity, my ego can be invested in something that is on the spiritual level, that is a soul, right? I can have, let's say, a spiritual ego, yeah? At the same time, I can have a very bodily oriented ego, like, oh, I'm an Indian man, like, because I'm an Indian man, that's my ego, you know? And so ego isn't necessarily a negative thing. It's just something that also needs to be elevated, right? Our ego is effectively a manifestation of our consciousness. And it's effectively this level of this identity pyramid, as you will. It's about raising our ego, raising our consciousness to that highest level. This is what it means to have an elevated consciousness. Yeah. Yeah, I guess maybe speaking a little more about this, it's kind of pertinent to mention that it's very easy to see this and, you know, be like, oh, I have a soul, like I have a soul, and like let me like just focus on that soul level. But it's harder to identify with the soul, you know? Very often we kind of perceive ourselves as human beings with a soul inside of us having a spiritual experience, yeah? But it's more along the lines of we are souls in this human body having a human experience. Does that make sense? It kind of flips on its head and what is actually the center of it all. Because that's really the key is what are we putting at the center? Are we putting our body or our intelligence or our mind or my affinity for chocolate ice cream at the center of my existence? Or are we putting our soul? Is that what we're putting at the center of our existence? At the center of our identity? Yes. Any other questions with this?
An example of identifying with the mind.
I think this, I like this, I like that, I don't like that, you know, things that the mind is very much, it's in Sanskrit, it's called the manas. And manas also means the heart in some way. It's our likes and dislikes. So I like chocolate ice cream. I hate vanilla ice cream, you know? So we can see, like, I identify as a person who likes this, or I identify with this, let's say, thought of this attachment towards a particular thing. Yes? Does that make sense? Any other questions with this? No?
May I make a comment?
Yes.
So you use the word love, right? I was speaking about this last night and I've had these conversations, right? So when you say you love the Eagles and I say I love the Giants, right? So aside from who's right, who's wrong, are we both right? Are we both wrong? Are we just have an affinity and a attraction to these teams, right? But when you say, or when I say I love this team, where does that come from in us? Why is it that we love this object of something representing that team, something representing this idea that we have, right? It's something nourishing to us for whatever reason, and that may speak somewhere to the soul. Why is it nourishing to us? Why is something nourishing to me and not nourishing to you? Makes sense?
Yeah, so if I understand your question, it's more like, why do different people resonate with different desires? Or let's say different like attractions to things.
Sure.
Yeah. And that it's actually very much on the mind level, kind of to, what was your name, Prabhu?
Vasily.
Vasily?
Yeah.
Yes. So to his point, yeah, it's very much like, do I like something? Do I not like something? You know? And so I like the Eagles because, you know, my uncle was a Philly sports fan, or I like the Giants because I grew up in Westchester, you know, like we have some attachment to these things because of our circumstances, because of the things that we find pleasing on a psychophysical level, right? Like, the mind is happy when I see like people from New York, you know, if you've ever left New York, you've ever traveled like internationally, and then you come and you meet other people from New York, like, oh, hey, you're from New York too, right? That same attitude of like, oh, you see something familiar, you see something you like, and because of that you have affection and attraction and love for them, whatever it is. Does that answer your question? Yes.
I think also karmically we're born with certain desires and inclinations.
Yeah.
Listen to why.
This is also true that in psychology, there's this concept of a tabula rasa, which is that we're born with a empty slate. That's what tabula rasa means. That when we're babies, we're born with we're just born as a blank slate. We have no desires except those that are imprinted on us from our environment and from our nurturing, and we don't have anything inherent in us that we like or don't like. There's this idea in psychology like this. It's also largely been proven to be debunked because we are actually born into this world liking certain things. Just inherently, people will prefer X, Y, Z. I can't give you examples off the top of my head, but yeah.
So just boil it down to how much of this speaks to our intelligence and how much of it speaks to our soul. How much is it innate to our soul of who we truly are? And how much of it is our intelligence telling us that we love this thing or we're attracted to this thing, and then a year later we're not because it's not truly us?
Yeah. I think a lot of the
I'm
times,
too big on that. Does that make sense?
yeah. So you're it's more like why do I guess things fade? Like what keeps it like what keeps an unchanging attraction for something?
Sure. I think if it's the absolute truth of whatever it may be, it speaks to that. It speaks to the soul because it's unchangeable. It's
Yes.
the truth, the absolution of that.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think the answer to your question is very much predicated on the fact that there are things that we like and dislike throughout our lives, and there's things that we seemingly like throughout the entirety of our life that we always have some attraction to. I think it all just takes a little bit of introspection and pondering. Yes.
Sorry, did you finish? Sorry.
Well, yes, it takes a little bit of introspection and pondering into ourselves to actually identify, like, what is it about this particular thing, and like, what about this is speaking to what part of me? Some introspection is required. Yes.
Well, I was gonna say, you brought up a good point on the PowerPoint before about like reality and illusion, and how reality is connected to truth or something that's eternal. So something that lasts, like things that we like, we can understand that if it's something that is coming and going and leaving, maybe it's not something that's so connected to our spirit, or
Yes.
it's something that's actually like connected to truth. We can maybe understand that it's something connected to something temporary, like our mind or our intelligence. Whereas you can do basically anything, and it can be connected to spirituality, and you can feel satisfied. So we all have like unique individual experiences and likes, but there's a spiritual essence to it. And so when it's connected to something that is spiritual, and it takes intelligence, and maybe you'll talk about this, why it's important to know the philosophy, then we can kind of differentiate, I think. So I was just like thinking, because you just talked about that slide and how important it is to connect it to something that it actually lasts.
Yes. This. Yeah. Connecting to your I guess maybe it answers your question a little nicer than I could have, which is understanding like how much of whatever I'm being connected with is, as you say, that it's something that is eternal versus that is versus being temporary. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions before we move on? Great. Cool. So how do we actually learn from illusion, right? So this is the actual process of applying, let's say, whatever we perceive, whatever, like the actual process to your question, like how do we actually go about using these like temporary parts of ourselves in order to ascend that ladder? Yes, this is your question. And so this is actually kind of my main, let's say, if you take away one thing from tonight, this is really what I hope you take away, which is this 3-step process, right? So the first thing we have to do is we have to perceive. We have to just observe all the things that are happening, right? Not just around us, but also to us, how we feel inside. In the totality of our experience, we just have to just perceive. We just have to observe it using all the things that we have available to us. Our body, our senses, our mind, our intelligence. When something negative happens, like my girlfriend dumps me, I can see, hey, this makes me very sad. I can perceive this, right? This is something I can perceive. And so we should take this like data point into consideration. Yes? This is part of the actual perception process. And perception is very important because perception allows us to actually just make observations about the world that we may not have made otherwise. You know, there's a famous example given of the bee and the fly. I don't know if any of you have been to like Prospect Park, but there's apparently like a bunch of bees in Prospect Park. Anyways, but
Surprising.
yes. So, anyways, if you go to the park, maybe not Prospect Park, but if you go to any park, you'll see bees going from flower to flower to flower, gathering pollen, and then eventually they go back to the hive. Yes, this is what bees do. This is the attitude of a bee. They go from flower to flower, picking up pollen, and they go back to the hive to make the honey. Now, in contrast, if you ever observe like a fly, like just a mosquito or something, flies will not go from flower to flower. They'll actually go from like the dirtiest, stinkiest things you can possibly imagine. Like I once, on my way here, actually, I saw someone whose dog had pooped on the sidewalk, and they hadn't picked up the dog poop, and it was covered in flies. Yes? And so this is actually what we can observe. This is just something we can perceive, right? We can just observe this about the natural world, the things around us. Once we observe these things, the step 2 is to actually ponder. We have to actually think about it. Whatever we observe, whatever we like perceive and experience, whatever experiences that we have to actually just think about them, right? That's the hardest part, is just actually thinking about it. Especially in an age like today where we're just so distracted by phones, where just like, as soon as like, you know, there's a spare second on the subway, my phone comes out and I'm just scrolling TikTok or whatever. As soon as we like distract ourselves from the actual experiences that we're going, we just refuse to sit with them. We refuse to feel the emotions that we're feeling in totality, you know? If my girlfriend does dump me, right? It's obviously very sad, but rather than going and drowning my feelings in chocolate ice cream, right? I can then actually sit with that emotion and I can say, hey, like, why am I feeling this way? What about this makes me very sad? This is what it means to ponder. It's reflection, it's deep introspection, kind of to what I was speaking before, is that we have to use our intelligence, what little we know, right? What little we can, you know, glean from reading and hearing, and what we understand about the way logical inference and rules of understanding and all of the things that we have at our disposal. Just use whatever you have at your disposal to think about things, right? This is step 2, to actually ponder that, right? And once we actually ponder it, we'll come to some, let's say, thought, we'll come to some conclusion at some level, right? We may get to a point where we keep going in circles, this is true, but eventually we'll get to some thing where it's like, oh, well, I should, you know, maybe I should be like the bee, you know? Maybe I shouldn't just go around looking for gossip, looking for stinky, smelly things like the fly. Let me go try to find the positive things in life, like the bee does. The bee goes from flower to flower. So let me also be like the bee and go from flower to flower instead of dog poop to dog poop, like the fly. We can make this analogy. This is something that someone could reasonably conclude, observing both the bee and the fly. So once we do that, we have to actually put it into practice, which is the 3rd step, actually practicing it. We have to actually act on what we think we should do, right? We think we should do something, let's actually act on it, right? So perception, perceive things, ponder about them, think about them, right? And then actually put them into practice. And so this is all very good, but I can try to put it into practice and it may not work out. Like I might try to do it, I might fail, or it might work out. I don't know, right? So this is why it's really important to check your work, because we're not in this alone. You know, this is the other really critical part of going deeper past whatever illusion that we're dealing with, in order to find reality is that we can't do it alone. We can't do it alone. If you want to go far, you go together. Yes? And so this is why it's important to check your work, right? We check your work. In Sanskrit, in the Bhakti text, in the Bhagavad Gita, it says this is how you check your work against things. Every religion, every spiritual tradition in the world says that our holy text is a guidebook on life. Whether you're Muslim and it's a Quran, or you're Abrahamic religions with the Bible, or you're Hindu or practicing Krishna consciousness and you look at the Bhagavad Gita, the scripture is the manual for life, right? This is the philosophy. The philosophy is the manual for life. And that's the teachings. And then you need to learn these teachings from teachers, because very often we're not at that level where we can just read a book and immediately understand all of it. So we need teachers to explain this to us. And we also need friends to be able to say, hey, how you doing? How's it going? Have you applied it properly? Krishna, have you applied it properly? He has. He has. He's nodding yes.
Trying my best.
Trying your best. And that's all we can actually do, right? We try our best continually over and over and over again in those three things: perception, pondering, and practice. And through that, we can actually use the things that we perceive, these temporary things that we encounter on the levels of the body, the mind, the intelligence, and use it to start to identify with the soul, with that which is eternal. And so I think now maybe time for a little exercise. So I would like everyone to find a partner. Yes, pair off groups of 2-3 minute exercise. Yes, one of you will be partner A, the other one will be partner B. Yes, you all have found partners already. Yeah, I see a bunch of people looking around. Yes. Yeah. All right. Everyone's got partners. Yeah. Partner A, raise her hand. Partner B goes first. So yes, I haven't even told you what you're going to do. So this is the example. This is your perception, right? We've all seen this in New York. You've seen someone drunk and staggering around the streets of New York City, right? This is what you perceive. What can you, let's say, reflect on from this perception? Yes. What does this make you think of? And can you find something to practice from this perception? Yes. So, given this example, we've got a couple minutes. Discuss.
What is the significance of A?
Whoever, partner B shares their reflections first. Shares the other reflections first.
I guess it's first value.
You get this, but as far as A and B can bring multiple perspectives, and I bring multiple.
Yes. Well, just discuss.
As it evokes an emotion, as it evokes a part of emotion where does that emotion derive from? What experience?
When you go into pondering, maybe you start
triggering that emotion?
Why
would somebody be disgusted? Why would somebody be empathetic and say, where is that coming from? That's
whether basically
What do you think?
That's a good way of raising it. The person staring at the streets of New York drunk. Is it a terrible thing to do?
Are they a relationship?
Start there, my
It's a very valid
I guess the
question.
practices.
As I was telling you the other day,
Partner, if you haven't switched over to the other person sharing their reflections, let the other person speak for a bit.
Say the person is like,
for example,
maybe it's a case
we can see the good in this world.
maybe at that I guess it's literally in a situation where it's based on how I can guide them or not. Like, they're like, oh, respect the rest of the world. I don't want to this guy's
There's also the most
sometimes you look at them and you know, like, oh, this guy
we're observing how there is a relative. Where you have your own relative world. I also have other people also. Our relative truth is
I think that's a way to practice to ponder it.
They are all contained within
I don't want to end up like that.
I
Depends who it is.
So it's when we're talking about the end of the slide, we're talking about perception, right? Which is based on our experience. We are not of the story, but it's but this absolute truth
Time to wait all the time. It's like this thing
I'm always so everybody want to look at it.
At the very least,
The absolute
they're
truth.
like,
The person you're going to drive down the street of New York might consume alcohol. And alcohol actually is poison. Whether that person drinks it
or get them a glass of water.
that's the truth. Somebody who affects people in that way because of its intoxicating nature. So the truth is the nature of it.
That's all you can do. Whether they'll do something else, that's on them. By New York, focus on that.
I feel like that might have gotten everyone's attention. So what came up? What came up for people, right? What
big philosophy.
big philosophy is good. Yeah. What thoughts came up for people? What reflections? What did you ponder about?
Give us some safer example of what to practice on. Drunk people can be dangerous.
That's a really good just reflection. This is dangerous, right? That's obviously a very pertinent thing to take away. Yes.
I just think about what caused them. You know, even if it's happy, sad, whatever, even if it's just a regular party or they just go to the random bar, whatever, but just I think about what caused them to take the drink, go beyond the extra mile, and just watch. Like, just think about that. Like, what led?
What caused them to do this,
Right.
and how can I, let's say, avoid that maybe, potentially,
Yeah.
or how we help them in their situation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
I was telling Sim a crazy story. Anyway, long story short, I was with my wife on 23rd Street, and we see this woman tumbling from side to side, and she was going like into 23rd Street on the Flatiron, which is going east and west.
Mm-hmm.
The cars were going crazy. That night it was booming. There was so many people on the street, and nobody would help this woman. So our aspect of assessing that was like, I'm like, Monica, she's gonna get killed. She's like, we have to help her out. I'm like, yes, but so we didn't think about, what did she go through? Like if somebody spiked her drink or something like that, or if she was on drugs or whatever, we know she was like super duper drunk. So at that precise moment, our priority was just to simply get her to like a safer zone where there was no traffic. And obviously there was no, opportunistic characters on the street that would just kind of walk away with her.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, after the cab driver declined to take her home, we realized that she was, at the same time, her being super crazy and drunk, she was trying to kind of push us away a little bit. But somehow, I guess I started screaming like a total lunatic at the cab driver, and I said, "Are you crazy? you need to, like, this is a woman, you need to protect her, bring her home. And then I thought to myself, you know what? I said, come out of the cab, we're gonna bring you home. At that moment, I guess something switched, and she was like, oh, I think I remember where I live. And she told us where she was actually staying. It was actually a building that I went to visit a friend some years back, so I had been to the building a few times before. We brought her there, and we brought her even inside her apartment, which later on I told my wife, we went a little bit too much the extra mile for that person, because that was so much, but our priority was, there was such an inherent vulnerability in that person at that precise moment that it just like drilled our brains. We couldn't let that go.
This
And
person is struggling, and I should help them.
correct.
That's basically the
Because
thought.
like I was just telling him, if I know that we would have not done that, she would have landed herself in the middle of the street, and at least a bump that would have broken one of her bones would have landed on her from one of the cars.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we can put a little bit of energy towards something like that, I mean, do it.
Yeah.
It's you're let me put it this way, it's not like I'm saving a life, but you're actually showing some love and respect towards life, regardless if he's super duper drunk or not.
That's a nice resolution to practice, like
Yeah.
help people out in situations when they can't help themselves out. Yes.
I have a question. I didn't hear what, I see the statement, you see someone drunk and staggering along the streets of New York. And I took it from, I was speaking with Jim here, and I was speaking from a point of sometimes what we see, we think the person is drunk. I took it from another angle. I don't know, you know, we see someone drunk and staggering along the streets of, how do we know that do we smell the alcohol? I'm taking it to another level. We don't,
I just put drunk and staggering as just like a assumption of drunk, and because they're staggering around, like it would not necessarily drunk exactly, but like for intents and purposes, seemingly drunk. Yes. Seemingly drunk.
Okay. Well, if I see someone seemingly drunk, these days I say a prayer.
That's sweet. That's very sweet.
Say a prayer.
Yeah.
Call on Krishna.
Yeah.
Ask Krishna to please help this person.
That's very sweet.
Yes. And I say Hare Krishna, you know, because sometimes helping, like in Popu's situation, sometimes helping is not always, we mean to help, but sometimes the person has to go through whatever it is that they have to go through.
Yes.
But like he saw vulnerability, it was safety issues, trying to keep them safe.
Yeah.
But helping is not always we mean to. It's good to have compassion.
Yeah.
But there's a point where the person has to go through.
Yes, that's a nice reflection, and it's also something you can also put into practice, which is good.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyone else? I thought I saw another hand. Yes.
We kind of had the same thing where we were kind of, when we first see it, we're trying to decipher, like, is this good or bad? Like, do they actually need help, or are they just like going out and trying to have fun?
Mm-hmm.
Or are they like actually like kind of in danger?
Yeah.
And that would determine like what we would actually do. Because we were saying like they're having a good time and like, okay, whatever. But if they're in danger or something, we were both saying like maybe we just like pretend that we're on the phone, or like kind of stick around, like just watch, just to make sure that they're okay. Because also we've had the experience that sometimes people don't want help.
Yeah. That's, listen.
Especially in New York.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very kind of like mind your own business type of thing.
Yeah.
I've gotten attacked a few times just by trying to help someone, or like trying to feed someone and like throw the food. So.
Put on the food.
So
Yeah. So yes, these are all wonderful reflections, and things you can also kind of put into practice as well. I kind of just listed a few things that people could think. Not necessarily my thoughts, but this is something someone could think. This is some reasonable conclusion. Like, hey, I see someone drunk, and I just says, yeah, that sounds fun. We should do that. Yeah.
What he was using.
Yeah. Someone needs help. I'm glad they don't drink. Maybe I should help them. Yes. I'm so thankful I don't drink anymore. You know, I'm like very glad that you're not in that situation. This is another thought people could have. Let me like this thought, this pondering could result in a resolution to let me still refrain from drinking and so on. You know, maybe if you're a little more spiritual, you've read the Bhagavad Gita, you remember how in the Bhagavad Gita Krishna says that he's the taste in any liquid that attracts people. He's the intoxicating factor in alcohol. And so this person who's drinking, they can also think of Krishna because they'll have a drink and think of Krishna. And so if you're a little more spiritual, you can think of this. No, actually, this is true. It's a true story. Srila Prabhupada, who I don't know if everyone's familiar with, he actually gave a lecture at one time.
That guy.
Yes, that guy. That person right there. He gave a lecture one time in which he was speaking, and there were a few drunks in the back of the hall. And so he said, actually, even if you're a drunk, you can still become Krishna conscious because every time you take a sip of alcohol, you can think, hey, the intoxicating factor, the thing in this alcohol that makes me a little tipsy, that's Krishna right there. And then you'll become Krishna conscious because then you're thinking of Krishna. This is a true story from Srila Prabhupada. He said that. And, you know, maybe if you're also extremely spiritual, you can see someone staggering around drunk and you can think, Lord Nityananda is drunk on the love of God, and he's always staggering around drunk. And if you don't know who Lord Nityananda is, that's a complicated answer, and see me after. I love to talk about Lord Nityananda. We can discuss. So yeah, this is, I guess, maybe it's a simple example, kind of run through like how we perceive these things. Like someone drunk and staggering on the streets of New York is a very common thing. It's very clearly illusion. It's something that we recognize that this person is identifying with a very temporary thing. At the same time, we can use that to spur ourselves on in our path towards identifying with that which is real, to go deeper beyond whatever this illusion that we're experiencing is. So with that, leaving you with a question. So how do you try to go deeper, right? So maybe that can be your little meditation for the next week. If you guys have any final questions, I think this would be a good time. Otherwise, that's it for me. Any final questions?
All these tools are so easy when you speak about them, but they're so hard when you actually have to practice them.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing, is actually just remembering to do it in the moment. Yes. And so that's where it just takes a little forces outside ourselves. Yeah. It's easy to talk about. It's a very simple process. Just perceive things, ponder about them, and then put them into application. But actually, there's actually a fourth element, which is just praying for the ability to actually do it in the moment, right? That's also the fourth element, is prayer. That we can actually be able to follow this process when we need it the most. Yeah. Yes.
So is the idea to still have mental preferences, but just not get attached to them?
Yeah, like I can fully accept. I love my chocolate ice cream, I love my Philadelphia Eagles sports games, but just not getting so attached. If they win, great. If they lose, oh well,
Right.
If I don't get chocolate, I'm stuck with vanilla. If I'm stuck with vanilla, then okay, what to do? But I would obviously prefer chocolate. It's not wrong to have preferences.
You won't deny them,
Yeah, you don't deny them. Yeah.
Right. Thanks.
I wonder if you can use illusions like for creativity. Like I was really sleepy and I was reading a novel, and then I was so tired that my head started like awake but sleepy, and I started like my mind started making where the thing that's gonna happen next. It was coming out of my mind, not out of what I was reading. That's how I knew I was sleepy.
Mm-hmm.
But that illusions can be used to create things.
Yeah. Yeah. No. It's part of the.
If you know the illusions, and
Yeah.
you can actually
You can
mess
harness with. Yeah. That's
rather than have them mess with you.
exactly. That's part of the process, right? If you know it's an illusion, you can harness it to help you step up, the same way that you get a splinter out with another splinter. If you know that it's a splinter, and you're using it consciously, then you can use it to remove the existing splinter. Yes? Yeah, that's a nice reflection. Zim.
So you said that reality is eternal and illusion is temporary. Or like Bhagavad Gita says that. So does that mean like our life or like our reality, what we see and perceive at the moment, is like an illusion, like all of our friendships, connections, or like everything in our life, like does that mean it's like false and illusory? And because they are temporary, like all these connections are temporary in this world. And that's the question, but also like how do we find that connecting piece, that it is actually eternal in a way. Yeah, like our existence in this like infinite universe.
Yeah. So yes, like everything that we do, like our perceiving and like the interactions that we're having in this world are largely temporary. Yes, largely temporary. At the same time, just because they're temporary doesn't mean we shouldn't give them the appropriate attention that they deserve. You know? So you can kind of think of it like this is a pyramid. I made this a pyramid for a very specific reason, actually. Is that how many of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yeah, most of you. It's basically a pyramid where like on the bottom level is like the most basic needs like food, water, shelter, and like like needs for like emotional connection and like self-realization all the way at the tippy top, right? And so a healthy